So I'm at the barn hanging out. I love Houdini, who's getting his PEMF treatment. That's pulse electromagnetic field therapy. It's what keeps him being him. A year and 3 months ago, I was concerned about having to put him down in a short period of time because his eyes were just dead and his body was just really restricted in movement, and he was clearly not feeling well. And he's pretty chill right now, but I think he's kind of in a grass coma because he was on turnout eating. I'm actually a little concerned that he may have gotten too much grass. I've been really careful, but about introducing it back, but he is, is there something wrong with your eye? No, he's just dozing. Are you taking a nap? You gonna take a nap? Anyway, so that's Dini. And there's a story that I've been trying to write for probably a decade now. Those who know me or have known me for a while know that I write a lot, primarily journaling. I've started a million stories, but I've never finished a single one, unless it was like a class assignment and was short. But as far as like book length or even short story length, I don't generally finish. But I have tried to write our story. And tonight I decided to tell it because it's the main driver behind the majority of my life decisions. So I grew up on welfare, or my mom was on welfare when I was a kid. And I was very lucky that my grandparents had property, and because of them, I had access to education and opportunities that someone of my financial situation would not normally have had as a kid. And when I was about 10, my mom says I was younger, but I remember it being about 10, I started saving for a horse. And every county fair I would go and I would pick the horse I wanted to buy that was for sale at the county fair. And that, of course, didn't really happen. And every Christmas I hoped there'd be a pony under the tree. That didn't happen either. But I saved, and when I was 13, in December of 1995, so Houdini would have been about 6 months old, I saw an ad in the paper for a half Arab colt that was registerable, flashy colt with 4 white socks, and $500, payments okay. And it was that payments okay that got me thinking and dreaming that maybe this horse would be the one that would actually come home with me. And I don't know why my mom went for it, going to see him. He was way out in Lorraine, which if you're in my area, is a bit of a hike from Eugene. It's about 40 minute drive. And if I'm remembering correctly and not mixing up my timelines, that was not a great time for us financially. I think my mom was back in school, and we had this little old car that was dependable, but we didn't fill up the gas tank. We bought partial tanks, or a few gallons, or a gallon at a time to get from here to there. So driving out 30-40 minutes and using a half a tank of gas, which I still remember is how much it took to go there and back, that was a financial commitment for my family, and my mom was a single parent. Anyway, but she agreed to go see him, and this was in December of 1995, like I said. And we went out, and there was this horrifically ugly hairy colt, which I look at pictures now, and I would never guess that he would be the horse that he is now, because he was just He was skinny. He had this terribly shaped neck. He was fugly. He was very fugly. And most babies are because of growing stages, but he also had the misfortune of being in the hands of a horse trader. So I went out to see him, and I didn't have enough money saved that I thought that I would be able to make the down payment, which was $150, and then $50 a month payments. There was a person in the barn, so I stopped the recording. So I didn't think that, or it didn't feel comfortable. I think I had $200 saved at that point. And that's 3 years of saving. And I was a saver. I saved everything. So it was pretty scary to make a $500 commitment plus care. When I only had $200, and that was 3 years of work and saving, and it was hard saving. I babysat for $1 an hour. Like, money did not come easily. None of that came easily. I would occasionally get some money for birthdays and Christmas, but generally speaking, that was not the norm. And so we left, and the horse trader said that she would call when she got ready to sell him, because she had only put the ad in the paper in case someone wanted to buy him for Christmas, but she wouldn't actually start marketing him to really sell until the spring, when the sales market started to pick up. And so that call came in January or February, and I can still remember the knot in my stomach, because I still have a lot of anxiety about making phone calls. That's not actually true. I've somewhat outgrown that, but for about 20 years of my life, I would get a anxious knot in my stomach every single time I made a phone call. And this was the most important phone call of my life up to that point. And that was when I called the horse trader and I asked if I could work off the $45 a month board, which is insanely cheap, but it was pasture board, and it was 1995. Well, at this point it was 1996. So it was winter, spring 1996. And she said she would let me, and that is what made it possible. And then I had gotten $40 for Christmas, which I think gave me the down payment and then 2 months payment. So that would get me through until the first payment that I didn't have saved would be due in May, and it was February. And so that was enough for me to take the leap of faith and sign the contract. Now, I was a 13-year-old kid and signed a contract. I didn't think then about whether it was legal or not. And I found out later she thought I was 16, because I guess it was funny. When I was 13, people thought I was 16. And then when I was in my 20s, people thought I was in my early teens. So I don't know how that works. But anyway, so that is how I bought Houdini. And then 2 weeks after I signed the contract, my grandparents had 40 acres. My grandmother had been diagnosed. Wow, I didn't think I'd get super emotional. I think, okay, I'm trying to remember the timeline. She either got diagnosed that year or the year before with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So it was a really rough time for my family. Wow, did not know I had this all in here. And when I told her and my grandpa that I had bought a horse, because she had not been supportive of me having a horse at that point. My grandparents had 40 acres, and were well off enough that if they wanted to buy me a horse, they could have. We did have a pony and a mare at the property. Misty and Tara. So it wasn't that I didn't have a pony. She wasn't mine. She was all the grandkids. But I don't know that I had shown any dedication whatsoever up to that point to make me trustworthy of an animal. I didn't realize that at the time, but now as an adult looking back, I can totally understand their concerns. And obviously my mom did not have the financial means to help in any way. So she said that he would never, ever be welcome at the farm, which is what we called my family's property. And in typical my fashion, I think at that point I was like, that's fine, I'm working off board. So you know, even at that age, I was someone who got my ducks in a row very carefully. And so that was, I don't know if I signed the contract in February, and then I probably told him end of February or beginning of March. And that decision to sign the contract was absolutely life-changing. I'm not saying because of Dini. It was because of Dini, but that's not what it was. This was the first time in my life that I ever did something that I wanted really, really badly. And it was a total act of faith. I didn't know how I was going to come up with the rest of the money. I didn't know how I was going to support him. I just knew that this was my shot, and if I didn't take it, I might never, ever get another one, or at least not in the foreseeable future. And so I did. And while my grandmother had reacted that way, before her passing, she would be the one who, she gave me $50 for my birthday that year to help make a payment on him. She paid for his gelding. She paid for him to be registered. These were Christmas and birthday gifts. I would get a certificate saying, we'll pay for him to be gelded. We'll pay for, and this was from her specifically. My grandpa and her lived together, but were separated. And so they gave gifts separately. But, and so from my grandmother, that's how Houdini was paid to be registered. That's how he was paid to be gelded. That's how I received one of the payments to pay him off. And then, I received more money as gifts than I'd ever received in my life, because everyone knew that I needed it to be able to pay for him. And so I got more money for my birthday that year and graduation than I'd ever received up to that point, I think, in total in my life. It still isn't a lot of money to someone who wasn't limited in finances the way I was. But I think I received like $200 for my birthday and graduation, which was close to enough to pay him off. Originally, the horse trader that I bought him from said that he had to stay on her property until he was paid off, but she let me take him early. And so I don't remember what month he came home. He should have been paid off in September, but I think he came to the farm in June. And I didn't know what I was doing, guys. It was so dangerous. There was one time I was out walking Houdini in the field, and he reared up and he tapped me on my forehead with his hoof. He wasn't being aggressive or mean. He was playing like a colt plays, still a stud colt plays with other colts, but that doesn't mean they won't kill you. And I knew absolutely nothing at that point, and he was so dangerous. And so, hang on, the machine just stopped. It should make clicking. Are we good? Is it too heavy? We're all right? Is it too strong? So that's the sign of a release, the licking and chewing without having a treat or anything. Okay, back on. This is gonna be a very long video, guys, but I've got 26 years plus to cover. So, let's see, this is my 8th grade year. Graduate in June. So I bought him in February of my 8th grade year. Graduate from 8th grade in June. Now there's a train. Let's see if they're done honking their horn, hooting their horn, whatever you say. And I don't know at what point he got paid off, but he got paid off. And he's very dangerous. I don't know anything. He's just, you know, the worst possible scenario is a kid that knows nothing and a baby horse that's still a stud colt who knows nothing. But I was lucky. My mom had found a horseless 4-H group for me and my sister. And so I got involved in 4-H, and I was with that group for, I don't know, a year or two. And then when I was in high school, I wanted to be on the high school equestrian team. Oregon High School Equestrian Teams back at that time. That's the name. And the coach of the team also led a 4-H group. And so I'm not sure of timing, but what ended up happening is that I switched 4-H group. Sorry, my nose is running. I switched 4-H groups. I moved Houdini into a boarding barn. I got a job, and that's how I paid for it. And for him, things were still really rough financially, and it became a lot more apparent how poor we were comparatively when I was in a boarding situation with a lot of people who had a lot more resources than we did. And at this point, we were not on welfare. My mom had gotten a job with a company called Monaco, which is now, they went bankrupt, but she worked for them all the way through their bankruptcy. She was the last group of people to survive until they got the letter saying they're bankrupt and you will not be going back to work. So our lives had gotten better, but she was still a single parent raising two kids. And while it was a good paying job, it wasn't a horse good paying job. I've never even had one of those, and I've been trying my whole life. So high school, because of that barn, and it kind of looped me into some trainers, and then I did 2 working student positions. I knew by this point, at some point I had made a vow to myself that I would never sacrifice my horse's health and well-being for blue ribbons. I think I was 13 or 14 when I made that vow to myself and to him. And then, and I knew I wanted to be a dressage rider because I wanted to really communicate with my horse. I didn't want my horse to be a slave to my needs and desires. I wanted him to be my partner and my best friend, which if you know us, you know that came true. And backing up a little, for all that it was super dangerous and that I didn't know what I was doing, Houdini and I we played chase games, and he would follow me, and I would sleep on a blanket in the pasture with him, and he would graze with me. Even though we had 20 acres to graze on, he would come hang out with me. So even though it wasn't a safe relationship, it was a solid partnership, and we were very bonded from a very young age, for both of us. And so I did 2 working student positions, I think at the same time. I did not have my license yet at this point, so without my family driving me everywhere, my uncle and my aunt were critical in driving me all over creation, in addition to my mom both to my job before I got my license, and then to working student positions, and then to the barn to take care of them. And it truly was, I had the support of my family, which is what made all of this possible. And then at some point, I started to learn, and I got better, and I managed to pay for some lessons on the ground. And the person taught a kind of Pat Pirelli type, like I learned some of the games, and then she was also we worked on ground stuff. And I didn't end up taking that further because the level of intensity wasn't right for Houdini. Houdini is an Arab, he's very sensitive, he's very smart. And he doesn't need that much. So there were things where you go from like a level 0 to a level 5, and I found it wasn't necessary. And I mean, now if a horse does something incredibly dangerous like rear end strike or kick or a severe bite, you might see me go to a level 5 disciplinary action. But generally speaking, I allow my horses to express their opinion as long as it's not dangerous. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know if they're in pain. I want them to be my partners and not my servants. So a lot of people don't agree with that. That's fine. That's just how I choose to have my horses. And they're both very, very good citizens. They stand in the cross ties. You can groom them. They're decent most of the time. Sometimes my 26-year-old decides to be a jerk just because he can, but they are good for the farrier. Neither of them bite. You can tack them up, hop on. I lunge the younger one just because I am cautious, but you could probably just hop on them and go and be fine. With my horses and the way I handle them, it is not necessary for me to make them toe the line. They get a set of restrictions that are not okay to blow past, but they are allowed to express their opinions within those boundaries. Anyway, I'm digressing. So, high school. Eventually, I am still a terrible writer. Guys, I was a terrible writer until a couple years ago, and I'll get into that later. So I was a really, really bad writer in high school, in my 20s and my early 30s, until I got physical therapy and found out that the reason why I kept falling off and couldn't ride was because my pelvis was rotated and stuck. Yeah, so if you have trouble riding, look into your biomechanics. If you're not riding with a trainer who actually knows biomechanics, I don't want to say leave your trainer, but seek additional instruction from someone who can recognize and address any limitations within your movement that are punishing both yourself and your horse. Okay, back to the point. Hi, kitten. This is, I don't know, Paisley, Presley. I call her Kitty or Kitten. There were 2 of them, and one got killed, and no one knows which one got killed. So we don't know what the cat's name is. So I've been told. So I graduated high school, and I went to college at Oregon State University in the equine science program for 2 years. And then I managed a barn locally. And by managed, I mean I fed and cleaned stalls. It wasn't. And I got certified as a riding instructor, level 1 CHA, Certified Horsemanship Association, but I was not good. Like, it was a pity pass, guys, a pity pass. I was good on the ground. I was really good on the ground, but I was still just was not a good rider, and I was very fearful and had a very, very stuck pelvis. And so I got a job for an FEI dressage trainer when I was 21 in Ohio and Florida. And I went there and I worked for 15 months. And that was amazing and awful. It was amazing because this is going to sound really bad. Oregon is not at the level equestrian-wise that other parts of the country are. And the way that horses are cared for in Oregon, especially 20 years ago, is very casual. It's not regimented. And part of that is the level of barn I've been in, because I've never had a ton of money to pay expensive boarding, and those are generally, fancy barns are generally full care barns, which are more expensive and everything. Anyway, so I managed this barn for 15 months. I left the horses, they hung out on pasture. I thought I would be gone for 5 years. I gave away my dream horse. When I was 19, I went to Texas for a summer and worked on an Arabian horse ranch for 3 months, and that was a critical point of growth for me, to just fly somewhere it was my first time flying alone. I went to people I didn't know in a state I'd never been to. That's not true. I'd been into the airport in Texas, and I had no money in my bank account, so if things went wrong, I was stuck there. I mean, my family would have rescued me, but yeah. And it was a phenomenal, hard experience. It was brutal. It was brutal work. It was brutal growth. It was brutally homesick, but the manager of the facility or farm became a lifetime influence for me. And I bought a horse on payments when I was there who was really high quality and really nice. Anyway, but when I was 21, I went and worked for an FEI dressage trainer, and I was exposed to what money could do. At that point in time, custom saddles were $5,000. The bridles were about $400 for a double. Training was $1,600, not including board. Board was $525 in Ohio, and it was $725 in Florida. You can tell how important money was to me because I remember all of these numbers 20 years later, or 15 years later. Because these were the numbers that I needed to be able to achieve, to be able to have the things that I wanted. And so I was there for 15 months. I thought I'd be there a lot longer. It did not work. I was of the persuasion that you just buckle down and do the work and you don't communicate. The military style of you just put up and shut up. I think that's the term. Anyway, and so instead of talking to the trainer and discussing what my goals are, what I'd like to see happen, that I wanted more responsibility, I just whined to friends, never communicated, and then I quit. And I said I would stay as long as they needed to replace me, but after 2 months, I was like, no, I want to be home for Christmas. I didn't think it'd take this long. So on December 13th of 2004, I drove from Florida to Oregon in a monster protege with my dog, Denali, at the time. She passed away a few years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's been a while. And I came home to my horses. So at this point I was 22, and I had decided, 22. And what I had concluded when I was working at this FEI facility with all of these 6-figure horses that and just finances that were outside my experience or even ability to conceive of earning, I decided that I needed to go back to school and I needed to get a degree and I needed to get a good job. And I needed to be able to do these things, that I would never have those things if I continued to work in the horse industry, because I knew that I did not have it in me to be a trainer. Physically, after 15 months as a 21-year-old, my knees were, or 22 at that point, my knees were aching every single day. My feet were aching every single day. I was struggling physically, and I was only 22. And so I came back. I went to school. I finished my degree. And I graduated in 2009. If you remember, 2008 was not a great year for finance. I graduated with a degree in business administration with a finance option from Oregon State University and a minor in equine studies. I graduated with $45,000 in debt, federal loans, and another $11,000 in private student loans. So $56,000 in debt. I had no confidence in myself, and I told a big story about what was available to me and what wasn't. Now, as an older, more experienced person, I know that a lot of what I thought wasn't available to me was only not available to me because of what I believed. But it doesn't really matter. The outcome was the same, and the outcome was a lot of debt and no means to pay it off. I went to work for Peace Health, a local hospital system, for minimum wage with no guaranteed hours, and no benefits. It took me 18 months to be hired on full time. I then spent a lot of money on healthcare things, trying to figure out why my body was not my ally. That is when I started on the journey to getting the help that I needed to be able to move and to fix my pelvis that I didn't know needed fixing. And that would be a 5-year-long journey, and I'm still on it. I learned some things, but still struggle with fatigue. Still have. I've had hip cramps since I was a teenager whenever I get in the saddle. Not every time, but and they've diminished now with a lot of physical therapy and stretching and stuff like that. But through this all, I had Houdini. All through college. I acquired other horses. But Dini's my man. He's always been my man. And about maybe 5 years ago, I had a filly that I was selling, and the person that I sold her to introduced me to a whole team of people that would fix my pelvis, fix my horses, biomechanics, teach me everything. And that's when I started to really learn how to ride. Dini was already over 20 at that point. So he had 15 years. I didn't start him until he was 4, of really poor riding. He didn't know how to carry himself. He was naturally talented, very gifted. And on the one hand, if I hadn't bought him, he could have gone way up the levels and done quite well, especially for an Arab. A lot of people think Arabs can't rock it, but he's really talented, and there's been a lot of judges and some body workers that have worked on him who've just been like, wish I could have had this horse when he was younger. But he also probably would have actually ended up as meat if I hadn't gotten him, because he would have been in the slaughter pipeline. He was a very difficult horse. Very, very difficult horse for the first 15 years of his life. And now I know it was probably body related. It was pain and being out and all of these things, but that wasn't a thing in 1995. It wasn't a thing in 2000. It wasn't a thing in 2005. It wasn't a thing until I think I was introduced to it in like 2007 to 2010. So he had a lot of time to have a lot of damage on his body. The one saving grace was that I've always been an inconsistent rider. And what I thought was bad is actually what saved him from further damage from my body. being out, because horses mirror us and they mirror our imperfections in our body. So my locked pelvis mirrors in my horse, and he can't move through a locked pelvis, which means that he then can't move correctly, which then means that his body is compensating in poor ways. So at 22 years old, I think it was 2017, he went and we got at a league show, which is like an open show. It's not an A-rated show, but it does have a licensed dressage judge. We got our personal best score of a 73 point something percent and got high score for the show at training 3, I think. Maybe it was training 2. I don't know. Anyway, it was our personal best score at 22. That's about when I learned how to ride. So I've known how to ride well for 3-4 years. I've been riding since I was a kid. So back to Dini. So Dini's been here through everything. He, no matter how bad a rider I was, he always went and showed himself. He always went and we hit X and he like had wings. He was just at 747 on the runway. He would show himself and he would get some good scores that we shouldn't have gotten. They weren't from me, they were from him. And then now he's 26 and we've been together for 25 years. His birthday is in June. So I guess he's 25, but in horses they round up on January 1st. And this brings me to the whole point of the video, like 40 minutes in. People do not understand why I will do whatever it takes to take care of him. They don't understand spending money on therapies for a 26-year-old horse. They don't understand. He could die tomorrow. All of our other horses died 27 and younger. So people do not understand spending thousands of dollars in supplements and body work and doing PMF and all this stuff for a 26-year-old horse, which is sad, because, I mean, given the means, would you do that for a family member? I mean, I totally believe that if an animal is suffering, that you should put them to sleep. You shouldn't let them suffer. But if you have the means and ability for an animal that you love to do therapy that makes them have a good quality of life and potentially live longer, why wouldn't you do it? So Dini is 26. Okay, I'm not a cat person. I like this cat. However, she is distracting. She's like, you sit here, you have to get... Oh, that's Hoodlum. He says, you're talking about Houdini and not me. He'll have a video later. Dude, cat. Okay, that was just obnoxious. So, taking care of Dini is my driver in everything that I do and have done since I was 13 years old. You can say that it's horses, but it's really not. I don't think that I would still be in horses if I hadn't had Houdini and kept him this whole time. I may have left and come back to horses, but I'm not obsessed with all horses. I'm not a horse crazy girl anymore, even though I joke about it. I love my horses, and I love horses in general as far as them deserving quality care and a good life. And I would love to rescue all of the horses in the world and end the meat packing industry, which is just torturous for them. It's horrifying experience. But not horse crazy. I'm not a kid anymore. I love my horse. And I care about other horses, but I'm in it for Houdini and Hoodlum. But really, Houdini. Hoodlum is Houdini's best friend and keeps him young, which is why I still have him. He's a wonderful baby, and I've kept him for two things. One for Houdini and one for me, because he's a lovely pony, and when you lose a horse, it's not just losing someone you love. You also have all these hours that are empty because it's a daily commitment. I'm at the barn every single day. Every single day. My horses are on self-care. I feed them every night. I clean their stalls. I do their waters. So even on a quote-unquote short chore day when I'm doing quote-unquote nothing, I'm still here every single day. And when I'm actually doing something with my horses, I'm here for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. And there's still more to do. There's always more to do when you have horses. So I kept Hoodlum because I raised him, and I knew that when Houdini goes, because that will happen at some point, that I would need someone to pick up the slack, because I had a filly that I lost that I call her my soulmate filly. I'll probably do a video about her at some point, but there'll be a lot of tears, so it's not going to be now. But Dini is the one that I hug when I'm grieving. When I have to grieve him, I have to have somebody to hug. But back to the point of why I do what I do. If you've known me for a long time, you know that I've done a million businesses. I have been in multiple MLMs. I was a residential painting contractor for 4 years until I was like, I can't do this physically. I was quite literally killing myself physically and putting myself in bed for weeks at a time after finishing a job. And then, so I was a residential painting contractor for 4 years. I did not renew my license in July of 2019. I intended to rebrand, and still intend to rebrand as an organization company and do courses. But the reason why I do this, the reason why I keep trying to have a business, the reason why I don't go get a job, is because I've never seen a job that could pay for my horses in the way that they need to be paid for. At least not one that was available to me, or that I felt was available to me. So I keep doing businesses, and I keep working on my money stories, and I keep trying to change and grow as a human until I figure it out and get past being a poor kid and stop thinking like a poor kid, because I still do. I'm 38 years old and I still think like a 10-year-old who grew up on welfare. And if you're honest with yourself, unless you've done a lot of work, you still think the way you did, the way you were raised to think as a child. We all do. It's how we're programmed. And unless you deliberately rewrite that programming, it doesn't change. And to change it is a life's work. But so my driving force, the reason why I keep trying and keep trying every time I fail, and I just get up and keep trying. Like, it seems really stupid to just keep doing the same thing over, failure after failure after failure, is that I don't ever want the vet bill to make the choice for me as to whether I have to put Houdini down. Or my dogs. I adore my dogs as well, and Hoodlum. But the vet bill has already made decisions for me a lot of my life. And it's my absolute worst fear that there will be a treatment available that will save my horse's life or give him a best shot, and I won't have the money to pay for it because I never have. Never have. Like, the money's never been there. And so that is why I am willing to do what I'm willing to do for Houdini. He's my best bud. He's willing to try for me, and so I'm willing to try for him for as long as he wants me to. And when he tells me he's done, then I will accept that very, very grudgingly. But that was not the video I thought I would be making, but that is the video you get. All right, night, guys.